Possibly the biggest and most well-known myth surrounding Titanic is that it was trying to break the speed record across the Atlantic and claim the blue ribbon. For starters, this was not true, as Titanic, along with her sister ships, were designed to counter the biggest and fastest ships in the world, the Cunard Line's Lusitania and Mauretania, by being the largest and most luxurious ships in the world. One reason people say Titanic was trying to break the speed record is that it was agreed by the White Star Line's chairman, Joseph Bruce Ismay, and the captain, Edward John Smith, to try and break the record. This was simply not true, as Titanic was designed to operate around a top speed of around 23 knots, still not enough to claim the blue ribbon, and Titanic only reached roughly 22.5 knots on her maiden voyage as Boiler Room 1 was kept cold or unlit. An argument people have for this theory is that a first-class passenger of the name Mrs. Elizabeth Lines, sometimes listed as Elizabeth L. Lines, and her daughter, Mary, overheard a conversation between Captain Edward Smith and White Star Line chairman J. Bruce Ismay. She reported hearing Ismay pressure Smith to increase speed and beat the Olympics time. This should be considered normal, though, as Olympic is reported to have reached a small burst of speed of around 23 knots on a run in February 1912, which then still the average speed on that voyage was roughly 21 to 22 knots. The other thing that could have been meant by this conversation was that the Olympic reached an average speed of 21.7 knots on its maiden voyage, both of which were before the Titanic disaster. If this conversation was real, and which of the Olympic's crossings was meant by this was still a relatively normal conversation. And lastly, even if Titanic put pressure on the boilers to reach speeds of around 25 knots, the Mauretania reached speeds of around 26 knots a few years before claiming it the blue ribbon. The funny thing about the speed record theory is that the speed Titanic was going wasn't even the speed record in March 1898, as the German liner Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse claimed the blue ribbon with an average speed of 22.3 knots. This was later broken by another German liner called the Deutschland in 1900.